This is a critical step in your project if you want to be successful. My name is Guilherme and I'm a project management specialist. I help professionals to become successful project managers. The content that I'm going to discuss here today is part of the warm-up for the project management journey. So if you're interested in that, go in the description here, click in the link and go there and subscribe. Project Management Journey, it's an event I'm going to spend 1 week to talk about how to develop your project management career. It's free, so don't miss it. I'm going to be there waiting for you. So what's the critical point that you need to be successful in a project? Well, you can have, of course, more than one, but one of the critical ones is planning. And why planning? Well, because planning is what will give you like the overview, what will help you to see the big picture of the project. Planning then will also help you in prioritization, will make sure that you also help you to identify risks, will help you to identify constraints. It's in the planning process while you properly define your scope, or you properly define your budget, and so on. Of course, if you are working, for example, with Scrum, you might not be fully identify for example, a scope, because the scope will develop, or you're going to know the scope through the life of the project. But still, the planning step is critical for Scrum, because there you're setting the goal for each sprint. So without a good planning, basically you don't know where you're going. And I'm going to give you an example here. I'm working with an aviation company from Belgium, and what happened is a few weeks ago, they have a big project there, and they were struggling. They were struggling in the project. They were not seeing the progress where they want to be, and of course they call me and they ask for help. So what I'm doing there, I'm not executing the project. I'm just doing a consulting project to try to guide them and put them the right track. In the first session I had there, and I start to talk with the project manager. In this case, it's a junior project manager. And then he starts to talk about the project. He starts to talk about the tooling they have to do, the space. They start to talk about assembling, documentation. And he was basically everywhere. And after like half an hour of discussion, I let him talk a bit to try to gain a feeling what's going on. Then I ask a question, okay, can you show me the project plan? And then he shows me the project plan. Then I ask him, okay, can I see the critical path there? And then he say, the tool they were using was not able to identify the critical path. I would say, well, whatever. I don't care about the tool. Can you tell me the critical path? Because more important than using a tool is know what you're doing. And then he told me, yeah, the critical path is tooling. And then, okay, what's tooling? Do you need to buy 1 tool, 2 tools, 10 tools? And he told me, no, I need to buy 100 tools, more than 100 tools. I said, okay, that's good. Big one then. And then I asked him, which tool has the longest lead time? And then he told me, I don't know. I know that all tooling takes 6 months. And I said, that's not possible. How can it be? You have more than 100 tools. I can bet money with you that there are some tools that have shorter lead time and some tools that have longer lead time. And then he could not answer. He said, okay, it's tooling. Where you are with the tooling? And then he said, we are looking to buy the fine. And say, okay, when you are going to buy it? When do you need to buy it? When you need to see the purchase order? When your lead time starts to run? And all those things, then he did not know it. And then he starts to talk about everywhere. Then I say, hey, let's come back to the timeline. What are the connections that you see here in between the tasks? Then he starts to talk about how the process say, hey. Then basically the second session, what I did say, let's stop, wait, let's take a step back, and let's restart this project. And then basically our first exercise say, okay, what's your scope? And then of course he starts explaining very different ways. And in this second meeting, there was also the senior project manager that should be helping him to execute the project. And when I talked with the senior project manager, basically he was also talking everywhere about the training they need to do, the documentation they need, the space that they need, because it's of course it's an aviation company, they need to do tools to fix engines and so on. And they say, yeah. Let's stop. And then we start, okay. Then we're gonna, let's sit together 2 hours, not virtually, of course, because I did not go to Belgium. And I think let's work first of all in your WBS. Do you have a WBS? That WBS stands for work breakdown structure. And he said, yeah, I do have it. Then he showed me a WBS with 5 items, 5 big blocks there. I'm saying, okay, good start, but we need to go deeper there. In all the levels that we need to understand those deliverables. Then after 2 hours, we were able to identify, to break down the scope that he was talking everywhere. At least we gain clarity in the scope. And the next step, we say, okay, now we're going to put these into a timeline. And then we are going to organize a timeline. And I asked him, of course, okay, what's the lead time per tool, how the POs are sent, and all those kind of stuff. But why I'm mentioning this? Because a lot of times when you talk about planning, people just tend to think that they need a timeline. It can be a MS project, or it can be a Primavera, or any other tool that you use, that they think, okay, I need a Gantt chart. That's my planning. And that's a mistake, because the Gantt chart, it can be part of the planning. But the Gantt chart is not the planning itself. The planning phase consists in much more than what you're doing there. And of course, I know that people might say, yeah, but if you use Agile in that project, you don't need to do this planning and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you cannot use Agile in a project like that, because you have some tools with 30, 40 weeks lead time. You cannot run through that through sprints. You need to plan in advance, otherwise you're going to delay the project 6 months, 1 year. So in that's a case that really project Agile, like Scrum, does not fit. And even with the culture in the company and everything that needs to be done there regarding documentation, because it's aviation, there's a lot of legal requirements and so on. So coming back, so planning, it's not a MS project that you get in the end and say, now it's done. What consists in the planning phase? Well, you need to have, first of all, an understanding of your scope. That's why during this consulting that I'm currently doing, that's still going on, the first thing that I did there, after 1 or 2 meetings where basically I got information everywhere, and I could feel that they were lost in what they were doing, because they were trying to tackle first all the scope at once. And that's not doable. You cannot deliver all the project at once and say, I'm going to work with all the deliverables in parallel. That's a horrible way of multitasking, because you're going to completely divide your effort and you're going to delay everything. So when you're understanding your scope, what you're going to do, you organize a WBS, work the breakdown structure, where you break down scope in smaller pieces and more manageable pieces. Because again, you cannot work saying that you cannot try to have those big blocks, or you cannot try to work in average, like I'm managing here tooling. And when I ask him, okay, how many tools you have? And he say 140 tools that I need to buy, 3 different suppliers, different deliveries, and forget about it, you cannot manage with one item. So you organize a proper WBS, so you have visibility in the scope. In only doing this exercise, he gained visibility in what he needs to do, but a lot more important, he also gained visibility on items that they were not clear in the scope. They say, this item here is not clear. So you need to gain clarity here. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to deliver your project if you don't know what you need to do, if you do not know how this is going to influence the other things. And then, of course, when you go for a planning phase, you organize a WBS, you plan it, and you need to organize a timeline. And in this timeline, you want to understand all the deliverables, how they are going to be done, and how they interact with each other. And by the way, another parenthesis here. If you're using Scrum, you have a WBS, you have a work breakdown structure. That's called the product backlog, because you have all your requirements there. And what you do part of the sprint planning, you select as you do part of the sprint planning, you select items from this product backlog from your WBS that you need to execute. You also need to understand during sprint planning how they are interconnected, or how they affect each other. So this is normal part of any planning. you might be doing probably only a different scale if you're doing a Scrum, because you have a sprint where you have maybe 4 hours planning, 5 hours planning, but that's it, maybe maximum 8 hours planning. So coming back to the discussion, so in the planning phase, you need to have the outcome. If you complete your planning phase and say it's done, and you have a Gantt, does not work. You have a Gantt chart that simply does not work. And here I'm going to tell you another story also to make this case. A few years ago, I was managing 2 big programs, and then at some point I need help. Then I basically hired a junior project manager to support me. And he was new in the company. Then he went to a period, training period, I don't know, 3 months. And they say then I had another small project that was part of one of my programs, and I told him, okay, take the planning for this project on, and work on that for next week. And next week we are going to sit together to discuss the planning. And then I asked him, did you do the planning? And he come, yeah. And I said, okay, let's take a look in your plan. Then he come back, of course, with a Gantt chart, which, by the way, I'm not saying that you should not have a Gantt chart or you should not have a tool of planning or something like that. I'm just saying that having that does not mean anything. And then he come back with this Gantt chart, and I say, okay, let's open this MS project there. Then I start to ask questions, and I start to see some weird stuff, and I ask, why you are doing that? Because then I say, because it was in the other timeline that you have there for the other project, I copied. And I say, yeah, but this is not part of the scope of the project. At least this is not part of the scope of this project. It's part of the scope of the other project. And he was like, Then it was product development. Then I start to look for the bill of material, what we are going to buy, suppliers, and so on. And then I look and say, why you are starting the assembly like that? And then he basically answered, because I copied from the other file that you have. And when I was asking those questions, I was not trying to blame him. I was trying to help him to understand how a planning process should go, and also to understand the value from what the working that he was doing there. But when he was answering me, he was not answering, I'm not sure. I saw in the other file and I'm copied. Can you help me to understand why you did that and what should be different here? That's one approach. And he was just saying, yeah, it's here because it was in the other one. I copy and paste it. Then this does not even make sense. Like, for God's sake, you use a project as reference. That's always nice because you don't need to build a full timeline from scratch. But you need to understand what's there. Again, if you do not understand the scope of the project, what you are doing, and in the end you have a Gantt, it's useless. Because very likely you have stuff there that it's not even part of your scope, and there's a lot of scope that you're missing. While I was in this discussion, he did not understand why those things were connected. And here's a very critical point. Why is so important that you as a project manager, you understand all those things there? Because you are the person that will need to explain to other people the plan of the project. Or you need to help the team to convey to something, to align to something so you can achieve a project. But if you do not understand the scope, if you do not understand the timeline, the steps that you need to take, if you do not understand how they're connected, it's useless. And what I did with this junior project manager, just to complete this story there, well, I worked with him another 2 interactions, and then I got exactly the same feedback, and every time I was telling him, you need to understand the scope of the project. Do you know what's the scope of the project? And he said, yeah, I know. Okay, do you know the bill of material? And I would ask him, not like the smallest component, but one of the critical components, is it part of the scope or not? And he would not know. So he was trying to jump in one step, because he had in mind that a planning is to have an MS project file. Then you have it ready and say, here is my plan. And you go ahead. The MS project file, in the end, if you use like that, is just useless. It's just crap. That will not help you with anything to do the project. And in the end, what happened after another 2 or 3 weeks, we started to have pressure from the customer. Of course, I was trying to manage the situation. And at some point, he could not perform and say, okay, give it to me. I'm going to fix it because also I cannot give a timeline to the customer. That's not going to work. Which, of course, I do understand that's not the ideal, because if you want someone in your team that's capable to execute things, you should not take things from people. But at some point, if you are under time pressure, you need to make sure things are done, and you cannot go and simply throw any type of crap in the customer. So that's how this story ends. But coming back to the other story that I mentioned, that the consulting that I'm doing there with the team in Belgium, why they're lost? Well, because they do not have a timeline. First, they did not have a proper WBS, and they are not even understanding what's their scope. And second, they do not even have a timeline. So they were trying basically to working out the deliverables in parallel. But then my question is, okay, which item is critical that you need to work to tackle right now? And usually, how you prioritize, it's connected with your timeline. You're going to prioritize what? The critical path, of course. But if you do not know what's the critical path, it gets difficult because you have a list of 200, 300 tests that you need to execute, and you do not even know which order that you need to execute. That's a recipe to fail. And I'm telling you that because sometimes you say, no, this kind of things cannot happen. And this is happening right now. It's a big company, a big international company that's everywhere around the world. And that's not the first time I'm seeing that in big companies. And I've seen that, of course, in small companies, but then, of course, there's kind of more understanding because it's smaller companies. There are less people, they have less specialized people. But if you're working a huge organization, you see something like that, you just see that the project management maturity of organizations can differ a lot. But think of that as an opportunity for you. Because if you start in your company and you understand those things, that means that very fast you can show good results. And I did that myself. In one of the companies that I started, that, by the way, the company that I ended up managing 2 big programs, I started there to manage own projects, and it starts to develop and starts to grow, and I end up managing 2 big programs there. They did not have a decent planning, and the guys there, I got a planning there from a previous project manager, and I would ask him, okay, why do you put this in those orders? And then at some point, he did not even made connections between some of those tasks. I say, yeah, but if you want to validate your final product, your final process, like in this case, we're following like automotive standard, that means there's a kind of test it's called process validation, because you want to guarantee that your entire process is validated for mass production. And he was saying, I'm going to do this test with prototypes that we produce in the lab. Yeah, but if you're doing the lab, you're not validating your process. Then this entire test that you're doing here, it's useless. Okay, not useless because you might be validating parts of the design and so on. You always can get some information, some knowledge of that. But in the end, you're not doing what's being asked to do. And I've seen that so many times. And I've seen that like when I started my career, like with people that's supposed to be like senior engineer, planning engineers. And I've seen even a discussion that from one of the guys, and he prepared a timeline again, because again, he thinks the planning processes have this MS project. And he prepared a timeline and he sent. Then the people start to discuss the timeline, how we can do better, how we can make faster because the customer is pushing. And he ends up, oh, what's the critical path? And he just said, that's the critical path. And everyone starts to look, but yeah, it was a construction in this case. And he was pointing a completely unrelated part of the construction. Like if you're building a house, he was pointing, oh, the critical path to get the house ready is build the wall. Because it's like, okay, it's part of the house to have the wall there, but you can build the house, you can live even in the house without a wall. And he was like, yeah, but this is the software gave me the output. But this software will give you the output based on what you put there. The software cannot do the work for you. Even artificial intelligence, if you talk with ChatGPT, you need to understand the kind of answer that you are getting, because sometimes you need to tweak a bit those answers. So ChatGPT can help you to be more efficient, yes, but ChatGPT cannot replace all the intelligence that you need to put on that. And this guy was there talking about the tool, What happened? It's probably a couple of months or later on here that he was fired because he had completely no idea what he was doing there. So I've seen that in Brazil, I've seen that in the US, I've seen that in the Netherlands, I've seen that in Belgium, and I've seen that even in different places. I've seen that working with companies in Mexico, that people simply do not understand what's a planning process. And they do not understand that the outcome of a planning, it's not an MS project. Okay, the MS project can be there, you can have a gun that will help you to execute the project. Everything is true. But if you do not have an understanding of the scope of the project, if you do not have an understanding in details, what's your plan there? What needs to happen so you can execute the project? That's what a planning phase means. You need to understand what needs to be done to make sure that you can execute the project. And here I see another mistake, very common. That's sometimes people create a plan and say, that's my plan. And first, they do not communicate with the team, and they do not get the team on board. One of the worst things that you can get is once things are hard in a project, because sometimes you have hard periods where there's a lot of pressure in the team and so on. People say, that's not my time plan. That's your time plan. We've never agreed with that. We've never signed these off. So part of your planning process is making sure that you involve your team. You get them on board. You discuss with them, hey, this is what the customer is requesting from us. These are the steps I'm putting here that you need to execute. This is the order. Does it make sense to you? Does it not? Am I missing something? And then you ask, okay, hey designers, I'm putting here that you need to design this product here in 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months or whatever. Does it make sense to you so you can reach this design in this time frame? And say, I do not know. Okay, let's talk about what you need to do. Do you need more time, less time? Why? Do we need more people, less people? What are the constraints that... And this is the value of the planning. The rest, the MS project that you get in the end, or the Primavera, or whatever you use, Jira, or you use Monday, this is okay. This is part of it. But that's something that's going to help you and guide you through execution. But you cannot guide anything in execution if you do not understand what's there. Because later on, what you need to do, once something changes, okay, say, oh, there's a change in the scope, something happened, a component or a tool is delayed, what you are going to do? Or you failed in one of the tests, or if you're working at construction, there's a heavy rain there that delayed your work in 2 weeks. What you need to do? Well, you need to understand how you can shift your plan around. How you make those connections. Can I do some crashing? Can I do some fast tracking here? But fast tracking is basically that you are going to execute tasks that should be going like fully in series. You are going to kind of overlap them so they have some things that go in parallel. There's a risk, of course, when you do that. And crashing is basically you are putting more people to execute the work. That's always a risk that you cannot go there, and there's also a limitation for crashing, but also means that if you're using crashing, it's costing more money for the project. So if you do not have this understanding on those different perspectives for a project, your planning phase is basically useless. That's why so many projects fail. You can imagine that if you do not know the scope of the project, how can you execute the project? That's the first step. And I've seen, if you look for example, on research from PMI, one of the top reasons why projects fail, it's because they do not have a clear goal or a clear target. How can you have a clear goal or a clear target if you do not understand what's the scope, what needs to be done, if you're missing a lot of requirements. And again, at some level, this is also 100% valid for Scrum. Because for Scrum, you have a product vision. And for this product vision, at least you have some requirements. And of course, the product vision can kind of evolve. You're going to evolve with the requirements, have interaction incrementally. That's true. But if you're missing like some critical requirements in the beginning, and if you keep missing it through the sprints, you're going to fail with your project also. So mapping those requirements for any type of framework that you're using, it's quite critical. And hopefully you make sure that this is done as soon as possible. So because then you have time to interact and to review, you are going to have time to meeting or to work on risk responses there. You are going to have time to work on problem solving, because I can guarantee to you that you're going to have issues. But it's only possible if you do have this understanding of the project. And this understanding of the project needs to be built on the planning phase. That's the main goal of a planning phase. So you need to get a good understanding on your scope. You need to identify risks. You need to identify constraints. And of course, you're going to create a timeline in the MS project. You're going to identify the critical path. And this is also important. But again, if you come with this MS project and say, what's the critical path? And you just point something randomly without even thinking, and you come up say, because that's the output I get from the software. Well, I bet if you're doing that, you're going to lose your job for ChatGPT. Because that's something that a machine can replace like that. And they can do even better. Because I'm pretty sure the artificial intelligence, the way we have nowadays, can put at least some level of critical thinking. So your value here is to have this critical thinking. Make sure that you are involving people. And I've told you, if you do that, you can really show off your work, not showing off in a sense of you are trying to gain a stage or something like that, but in a positive way. You are showing that you are competent, that you are capable, that you can grow in the organization. And I have cases that I've done that in 4 weeks, and people were really like, whoa, complimenting me. A lot of people are surprised. I've even heard like, I'm surprised because you just joined the company, you don't know our business, it's a new product for you, and I'm really surprised how fast you can come up with those things. So after 5 or 6 weeks, I was already performing and discussing with the top level of the company, with the top level of the customer, and everyone was like, congratulations, well done. Why? Because I spend, or not spend, because spending is not the right word. I was investing a lot of the time in the planning, doing a proper planning, understanding the scope, understanding all the connections that I need to have here in the timeline. And I might hear someone already saying that, but how you can really remember understanding all the connections? If you have a big timeline, I know I've managed projects like one of the programs I had a timeline with more than 1,000 lines there. And of course, if you ask me how the O-ring, whatever, small pieces of the bone are really connected with something, yeah, I would make a more general connection with something that's very small in my deliverable list. But for all the big items, the critical components, the big steps I had to take there, then I would understand in details what I need to do. If you talk about assembly, how many pieces do you need to assemble? When? How many pieces that you need to assemble per day? If you talk about testing, what type of testing? What's the duration? When the test is going to be executed? This is part of understanding the scope, and that this is what's going to influence your planning. And I've mentioned here at least already 3 examples of how the planning phase, or how the planning of the project is extremely misunderstood. and that's going to influence everything, because coming again the consulting that I'm working there, that's why those guys are lost, because they simply don't know what's the priority. And then I say, okay, then I have a huge scope and I need to execute everything at the same time. Let's do it, let's execute. And at some point they're discussing stuff that needs to happen like in 4 months, and the tooling, they were not even paying attention for that, for God's sake. And they already reporting the project as late. Without even understanding, without even having a proper timeline. And they were saying, yeah, we did a planning here. And this is not only the junior that I'm talking there, but also the senior project manager that was reporting this kind of stuff. And of course, when I was talking with the department manager, sometimes you cannot be so bland, or you cannot be so open. Of course, you need to try to put things in a more constructive way than sometimes I put like here. But I was telling him, I wonder how you keep up with that, because you're managing a department, and of course you also get pressure from your directors or from whoever you're reporting to, and you have no visibility how the projects are being executed. You have no visibility why the projects are delaying, just because there was not this proper understanding what planning means. So if you do not have an understanding of your scope, you did not do a good planning. If you do not have a timeline, here again, I'm not talking about having an MS project that you do not understand. I'm not talking about a Gantt chart that if I ask you 2 or 3 questions in this Gantt chart, you have no idea what's there. I'm talking about a Gantt chart that you invested your time, that you studied, that you go and check item by item, that you discuss with your team, that you get the buy-in of your team, that you understood the constraints, that you understood the risk. That's what the planning means. And that's what's important in planning. Because the MS project file, I can tell it's going to change probably several times. You're going to have a project, something will change, your supplier is going to delay something, I don't know, it's going to rain, there's going to be a risk, there's a pop-up, a problem. And what I can guarantee for you, if you're running a project that has 1 year, 2 years, 3 years duration, you're going to change your timeline several times. Why? And you're always going to adapt, change this, do that, and here we need to increase the risk, here we need to put more people, here you pay a premium, and then you look for solutions. But you can only do that if you understand your timeline properly. And if you do not do that, then sorry to say, then you're going to have a really big problem with a as a project manager. And again, I've seen that happening with a lot of organizations. I've seen that happening with junior people, with senior people, small companies, big companies. So if you want to succeed and to be a successful project manager there, you need to have a good planning process with the correct steps, with the correct understanding, the correct effort there, and the correct involvement there. Again, make sure you like this video and share with other people so it can get to more people and more people can learn project management. Make sure you follow me for more content. Also on Instagram, I have a Q&A open every day on my stories. So if you want to have questions, if you want to discuss project management, just reach out. I would love to hear from you, or you can also leave your comments here in this video. Remember, this content is part of the warm-up for the project management journey. We are going to talk about how to develop your career. We are going to talk about career development, how to improve your CV, how to prepare for interviews. We're going to talk about different frameworks, Waterfall, Scrum. We are going to talk about finance for project managers. Sorry. We are going to talk about project management practice, how you improve your decision-making process there. And then it's going to be four episodes, a lot of content, and everything is free. And if you really want to progress in your project management career, make sure that you are there. Make sure you interact there, because being there, hearing stuff and not doing anything also does not help. You need to make sure that you are there, watch it, ask questions, participated, because this is the week that I want to deliver as much value as I can for you. But I'm only capable of doing that if you are on board with me to get this value, and make sure that you also ask the right questions so I can help you with that. So, see you. Bye.